consequences for this type of behaviour, because that should send a very strong message to any other bullies and thugs out there that this type of behaviour and where we're able to assist in the broader efforts using those assets and personnel, we do, but obviously that doesn't involve people being deployed in the region.
Prime Minister, just in terms of the sanctions against individuals, you mentioned that 8 members of Russia's security council that there are 12 members. Could you tell us if this includes person share Medvedev, Sergei Lavrov, and individuals run
we will be taking action against those in the committee that have also been identified by our partners. So we're still working through those processes now, and we're working in concert with the United States and the United Kingdom.
Have you had a chance to hear the President intervention?
Well, no, I haven't, but I do support any attempts to try and avoid this.
You're not a
but
dish.
not without
You're a man. Most name brand bars and body washes
there cannot be any
suggestion
that concessions should be provided to a bully and a thug in return for not following through with threats of violence. That's not the sort of appeasement I would ever support, and I don't think Australians would either in this or any other situation. But certainly I appreciate the considerable pressure that President Macron and so many other leaders, Olaf Scholz as well, I welcome the decision he's made on Nord Stream. I think that's a very strong message, and I'm speaking with him next week about these and many other issues. And so I think many leaders have been seeking to do their best, but at the same time it's important that we hold the line that you cannot have Russia tell Ukraine about whether they can be in NATO or not, or issues that also impact on their sovereignty as a nation. They can't be a nation in name only. They must have sovereign carriage of their own futures and their own decisions, and that can't be the subject of bullying or threats or intimidation.
Will the West be able to hold firm against Russia's movements? Will the West be able to hold firm against Vladimir Putin?
I believe so, but I can assure you Australia will, and I can assure you that those partners we work most closely with will. The question is how many more will join us, and I think that's really important. I mean, I applaud the work of the EU. As I said, the German Chancellor, I applaud his decision today over the last 24 hours in relation to Nord Stream. I think that showed some real resolve. You know, when you face bullying and intimidation, yes, there's blowback. Yes, there's threats to your economic interests, and you attract a lot of attention by those who seek to bully and threaten you. Australia understands this better than most. It's a point I've been seeking to make now for some years to fellow liberal democracies. We are now living in a world where authoritarian autocracies are seeking to have their way, and the only defence against that is those countries that favour a world order that favours freedom. And liberal democracies have to stand together, and so many other countries, even if they're not liberal democracies, who do believe in those principles of the sovereignty of states. We need to stand together, and Australia will always do that. And but right now, my gravest fears or concerns are for the people of Ukraine and the many thousands, 38,000 Australians of Ukrainian descent, who will be terribly worried about loved ones, families, friends, because what we've seen amassed on their border is horrible. The worst kind of violence. Thanks very much.
So once again, Prime Minister Scott Morrison giving us the latest and saying that the UK and Australia and America are in constant communication about everything. He said that Ukrainian residents are top of mind right now and their safety as they outlined the sanctions that will be imposed. And President Biden also doing the same today, announcing sanctions from the White House, pulling up a live look of the White House right now. When we come back, we'll be hearing from Fox's Madeline Rivera from down in Washington, D.C. about the ramifications to the U.S. economy because of these sanctions. All the details coming up after the break.
Geostrategic outcomes.
Stocks also taking a hit Tuesday as Western leaders unleashed new sanctions against Russia.
We'll continue to escalate sanctions if Russia escalates.
Some economic experts warn ripples will be felt throughout different economic sectors, further adding to the strain of inflation already at a 40-year high.
Oil prices are probably going to go higher longer term. And to your point, that's going to be a big tax on the economy because everything we do involves oil. That's going to keep inflation higher.
President Biden says his administration is closely monitoring energy supplies and working with major oil producers to blunt gas prices. In Washington, Malda Rivera, Fox News.
Well, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin meeting with Ukrainian foreign minister, telling him that Russia is threatening the, quote, peace, security, and prosperity of Ukraine and of the transatlantic community. He confirmed the U.S.'s support is unwavering. The foreign minister telling Austin his country does not want war, but Ukraine is ready to defend itself if diplomacy cannot prevail. We want to play out those
We begin tonight with these major developments involving Russia and Vladimir.
Standing firm is one alliance territory. So, Mr. Minister, thank you again for coming today. It's great to see you back in the Pentagon. We have much to discuss, and I look forward to that and to working closely with you and other Ukrainian leaders to improve our defense partnership and to support our common values of democracy, security.
Why are dental companies lobbying to make this toothbrush illegal in the U.S.? This U.S. Army
We begin tonight with these major developments involving Russia and Vladimir Putin's moves involving Ukraine. 24 hours after Putin said he was recognizing two Russian-backed regions of Ukraine as independent, Tonight, President Biden before the American people calling it the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. The president saying Putin is planning to essentially carve out a big chunk of Ukraine. President Biden now announcing severe sanctions on Russian banks and wealthy Russians, warning it's just the beginning. If Putin takes another step, that there could be more. America's allies tonight united, acting quickly, the EU imposing sanctions of its own. And late today, we learned Secretary of State Antony Blinken has now canceled that meeting planned with the Russian foreign minister that had been set for this Thursday. That wasn't a surprise, but one more sign tonight reflecting the seriousness of this moment. President Biden speaking to the nation late today, calling Russia's actions a flagrant violation of international law, saying, who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries? A unanimous vote for sanctions from all 27 countries of the European Union. Germany delivering one of the sharpest blows, halting certification of that gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2, from Russia to Germany. President Biden saying this unity is something Putin hasn't been counting on. Tonight, Cecilia Vega standing by at the White House, Martha Raddatz in Ukraine. But we're going to begin here with our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, in Kiev again tonight.
Tonight, President Biden condemning Vladimir Putin after the Russian leader recognized 2 Russian-backed separatist states in eastern Ukraine and ordered his forces to move in.
He bizarrely asserted that these regions are no longer part of Ukraine and their sovereign territory. To put it simply, Russia just announced that it is carving out a big chunk of Ukraine.
Biden slamming Putin for declaring them independent states.
Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors?
Biden then imposing significant new sanctions against Russian banks, business elites and their families.
We've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West.
The European Union's 27 nations also unanimously imposing sanctions, with Germany freezing the major new Russian natural gas pipeline known as Nord Stream 2. Biden announcing he's also deploying 800 US troops already in Europe, as well as fighter jets and helicopters to NATO members in the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. The president insisting these are defensive moves and the troops will not be fighting Russian soldiers. Not far from Ukraine's border with Poland, Matt Gutman is with US paratroopers.
This is part of the contingent from the 82nd Airborne. They've been here for a number of days already. They're part of joint exercises with the Polish military, and we are just a handful of miles away from the Ukrainian border in that direction.
Their mission described as deter and assure. Deter Russia, assure the Allies. But Putin remains defiant, hinting at his possible next move, supporting the claims of Russian-backed separatists to the entire Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. The rebels currently hold around 30% of the Donbass. The rest is held by Ukrainian forces. Any attempt by the rebels with Russian military backing to take the rest of this land will almost certainly lead to a major conflict. Russia evacuating its diplomats from Ukraine, smoke rising from the embassy in Kiev after staff were seen carrying in what appear to be boxes of documents. Despite Kremlin denials that Russian troops have already deployed into the east of Ukraine, images have emerged of what seem to be Russian tanks and armoured personnel carriers there. Putin issuing 3 demands: that Ukraine abandon its goal of joining NATO, to demilitarize, and to negotiate with the separatists. None of this is likely to be acceptable to the Ukrainian government. President Zelensky issuing a strong and defiant message, saying we want peace, but we have a right to self-defense. In a rousing address to the nation, he said, we are on our land and we owe nothing to anyone. It's a view shared by the mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, a former world heavyweight boxing champion. He may have hung up his gloves a long time ago, but he knows that the time may soon be here where he has to fight once more.
As former soldier, I promise if my country needs me, I'm ready to fight for my hometown, for my home country.
All right, so let's bring in Ian Pannell live again tonight from the Ukrainian capital. And Ian, you know, the U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, just before we came on the air, saying he's now canceled his meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov in Europe. It had been scheduled for later this week. And Ian, do we know anything tonight about what might be happening in eastern Ukraine now that Putin has given the green light for Russian troops to move in?
Yeah, it's a good question because attention has focused elsewhere, but there has been a massive increase in shelling in that area. The body that monitors the number of ceasefire violations registered around 300 incidents a day throughout last year. Today, that number was 2,000. And I think most worrying is that the rebels continue to accuse the Ukrainian military of launching offensive operations, not offering any evidence. But this suggests that despite all these developments, the recognition of independence, everything that Putin has said, that they're still building a pretext for a potentially much larger military invasion. David?
Ian Panel leading us off again tonight from Ukraine. Ian, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Veterans, whatever you're going through, don't wait. Reach out.
Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Gabrielle Amato, live now from our Orlando studios. And we do have breaking news to bring to your desks and to all of your ears, into your homes today. The United States has officially declared Russian moves on Ukraine an invasion. They had previously not referred to these incidents currently occurring at the Ukrainian border as an invasion, but it is now confirmed that they have used the word invasion, and thus this is new developments. This is a situation that we continue to monitor, a situation that continues to evolve, and to help us kind of break down all of this, we do have a very special guest that we would like to welcome into the show, former intelligence officer and national security expert, Michael Pregent. Michael, first and foremost, welcome into the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. And we're just going to get your live, raw, and unfiltered reaction to the news we just broke. The White House has referred to this situation as an invasion. Your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me, Gabrielle. What's great about the White House calling this an invasion is it takes the incursion language off the table. We have to remember that President Biden said, well, it depends on whether or not this is a limited incursion. Now, with using the language of invasion, that actually gives the U.S. and our NATO allies more resolve, more of a backbone to impose strong sanctions, energy-related sanctions on Russia. That's what will hurt Putin the most. So I'm glad to hear that language coming out of the White House.
Yeah, and like I said, this is information that is coming to our desk right now as we speak. To really begin, let's set the precedent here. We heard a very interesting speech from President Vladimir Putin yesterday, a speech where he spent an hour recapping history that seemed a bit deceptive, perhaps not the way that the world sees this history, riddled with nostalgia. What did you make of his speech yesterday?
It was self-absorbed. It was Putin's view of the world. Basically, Putin told Ukraine, you don't exist without us, and you exist because of us, meaning Russia. And the panel that he held before that with all of his advisors, where he tried to make it look like there was dissent and there was an actual debate where people could question whether or not he should go into the Ukraine. And at the end of that, deciding after this speech that he's going to authorize a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine just shows how comfortable Putin is being wrong on history and being wrong on international law, but comfortable nonetheless, comfortable enough to order an invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, it really is a situation that is very layered. It's very complex, but we are getting reaction from all around the world today. Yesterday, President Biden signed sanctions, but these sanctions were actually only affecting those two separatist regions, Luhansk and Donetsk. When do you anticipate, and we're getting reports that those sanctions on Russia will come at some point today, but when do you expect those to take action? Because those are really the ones that are going to have a true impact.
Right. Sanctioning these two breakaway republics means that no American could do business in a war-torn sector of Ukraine. It makes no sense. The Nord Stream 2 language is very important because both Germany and the United States have said that they're going to halt the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And that's Putin's way of, again, pushing gas into Germany, into Europe, and getting paid for that. Anything that directly affects Putin's ability to make money off of his energy sectors, that would be punitive. Sanctions on Russia's energy sectors is where the United States needs to focus. But what I like is there's been some talk about, especially from the UK, about going after some of these oligarchs in Europe that have these incredibly expensive properties in Western countries, in NATO countries, that they could take, that they could seize. And once these oligarchs start feeling the pressure of what Putin's doing, it is amazing how much influence they would have. You could literally pick 15 of Putin's closest oligarch friends, seize their assets, and they could put enough pressure on Putin to reverse his course of action. Those are the types of things that need to be on the table. Right now, we're still hearing language. They may have called it an invasion, but they're still using language like, it depends on what he does next. And that language signals to Putin weakness. And his Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, has witnessed this firsthand. He's seen the Biden team collapse in Vienna with the Iran talks. He saw the Biden team collapse in Afghanistan with the Taliban. And those are lesser foes. So Lavrov and Putin know that if Iran and the Taliban can take advantage of this administration, what can Russia and China do? And we're starting to see that.
That's an interesting point because many suggest that the U.S. were actually very much on the offensive during this entire situation. We saw Antony Blinken essentially lay out point by point what he expected Russia to do leading up to this invasion. Many saw that as an offensive approach, but you don't agree. You see that as defensive and not enough.
No, we basically heard the administration say through Antony Blinken that Russia is going to invade. We have the intelligence that they're going to do this. And the question's asked, okay, so if you know they're going to do this, what are you doing about it before the invasion? Why not put all these crippling sanctions in place first to exact a cost and then prevent Putin from moving in? Now we're slow crawling these sanctions depending on what he's going to do next, and it's problematic.
And that's interesting because it was actually that exact sentiment was echoed by President Zelensky at the Munich Security Conference. He said, what are we waiting for? Why are we not inflicting these sanctions now? Well, we are expected some of those sanctions at some point today, so we'll keep everyone updated as they do hit our desk. But back to Putin's speech, do you think that the Baltic states are also at risk here? Because his speech obviously was bashing Ukraine. He was very, very, very passionate about the fact that Russia is responsible for Ukraine, that Ukraine should be part of Russia, that culturally they are one. But do you think that perhaps Putin's long-term plan also affects the Baltic states, who, by the way, are members of NATO?
Right. That's what, if you are in one of those states, the Baltic states, and you're part of NATO, you're questioning U.S. resolve. You're questioning Article 5, which means that NATO countries will come to your defense. We watched Putin amass a military force, an invasion force, in real time, not under the cover of darkness, but out there for everyone to see, and the West and the international community did nothing about it. If you're one of these Baltic states, you're worried. And now's the time to put air defense assets in these Baltic states. The Putin economy in Russia, they can't afford to replace an aircraft if it's shot down. So we need to put an air defense capability in. That's a defensive capability, not an offensive capability, to show that there's going to be a loss if Putin decides to do anything. But right now is the time to sanction Putin's energy sectors, to make this very costly, to hurt an economy that's already bad because of Putin's adventurism, and send a signal that we don't have to put 100,000 U.S. forces into these countries. We can simply hurt Putin by taking away his gas station. McCain famously said that Putin manages a gas station with nuclear weapons. That's what McCain called Russia. And the way to hurt Putin is to go after the energy sectors and to go after these oligarchs' assets. they would put so much pressure on Putin that he would back down now and wouldn't look at doing more to expand Russia's reach in those Baltic states.
Well, those types of sanctions, we are seeing them in action across Europe. The European Union highlighting a plan and working on a plan that should be released tomorrow morning, targeting 27 individuals, businesses, and entities. Right. So it does kind of correlate with what you're saying you would suggest to do in this situation. Speaking about Americans who perhaps are in Ukraine at the moment, do you think the U.S. is doing enough to keep them safe, to keep them secure during such an unstable time? We did hear that members of the embassy were moved overnight to Poland, but it has been reported that they've been moved back to Lviv, which is obviously just about an hour and a half away from the Polish border, but they're back in Ukraine.
So this is where I'm in disagreement with the administration's push to get Americans out. They've also urged Zelensky to leave the country. He can't leave the country. If he leaves the country, that signals that the whole country could collapse to this Russian invasion. I would argue that the State Department, instead of moving the embassy, reinforces the embassy, not with soldiers, but with diplomats, and puts diplomats further out east to basically handle refugee issues. But the more Americans in country, the less likely Putin is to target population centers that could kill Americans. That's something we saw in Syria. Putin did everything he could not to have a conflict with the U.S. in Syria. Putin was worried about the U.S. response. The United States killed 250 of his mercenaries, and Putin didn't have a response because he was worried about escalation. Keeping Americans in Ukraine, urging Zelensky to stay in Ukraine, would actually deter Putin's further aggression. He does not want to kill an American. You do that, that's a red line. For a Democrat president and a Republican president, it's a red line. And I think that's what I would urge, is that we don't leave. We just in more Americans, not uniformed Americans, just diplomats, have a presence on the ground that makes this very costly if Putin's accidentally, whether it's his separatists or whether it's his invading force, kills an American.
Well, speaking of diplomats, my next question is, do you think that diplomacy at this point is off the table? I know officially it is always on the table, but it does appear that that window is narrowing. What are your thoughts on dialogue and diplomacy still working at this point?
Well, diplomacy only works if a military option's on the table. And I'm not talking about an invasion, but I'm talking about giving the Ukraine what they asked for. They asked for more offensive capabilities, tanks, anti-tank weapons, and air defense assets. If you are willing to use the military option by supplying offensive and defensive weapons to the Ukraine, then diplomacy is more likely to work. And diplomacy only works when you understand how your enemy thinks. Now, Lavrov and Putin know very well how the Biden administration thinks, based on what it saw in Vienna, in Kabul, and now with Ukraine. But does the administration know how Putin and Lavrov think? They are going to exploit weakness. They're going to exploit Blinken. Blinken is not a tough adversary. He can't go toe-to-toe with Lavrov. And Biden famously said he'd go toe-to-toe with Putin when he was president, because he's the only person that had done it in the past. We know that's false. That's just bravado during an election cycle. Diplomacy now is hard power, smart power, sanctions, designations, things that hurt Putin directly. And if we use targeted sanctions, and if we speak with one voice, and we don't use this caveated language of it depends on what he does next, I look at these two places, Donetsk and Luhansk, as lymph nodes. Cancer has gotten to Donetsk and Luhansk in this initial incursion or invasion, and cancer doesn't stop once it gets to the lymph nodes. It continues. Putin is this cancer. You can't give him these two breakaway republics and expect them to stop and be happy. He sees 2 more years to get all he can, because that's how long the administration has if it doesn't get reelected, 2.5 years. And Putin, China, and Russia are all, Iran, China, and Russia are all trying to get all they can. And we're seeing that now. What message does this send to China when it comes to Taiwan? This is 2.5 years of chaos that we're about to see.
It certainly is a situation that not only has implications in this direct situation, but one that could have a domino effect in other world issues, just as you are highlighting. What do you ultimately think that Putin's end goal is here, as an expert in the area?
Well, he's going to be allowed in, and then he's going to put pressure on Europe to cave on the sanctions that target his energy sector. If they cave on sanctions, then he'll push further in. I don't think he's going to go to all the way to Kiev, or Kiev is Russian, Kiev is Ukrainian. I don't think he's going to do that now because I don't think the international community is going to allow that. But the international community is allowing this. These two breakaway republics are now going to be under Putin's control. And if there aren't severe ramifications, he's going to continue to push west.
And you did just make a great point there that I think some of our viewers, when they watch and cover this news, they may be very confused about that pronunciation. Kyiv is the way that the Ukrainians say their capital city. Kiev is the Russian pronunciation. So technically both are correct, just as you hinted at there. Michael, thank you for that lesson. I'm sure some of our viewers don't know that, so everyone learned a little something new today. Again, as an expert in the area, what do you think what kind of impact is this situation going to have on our viewers who are tuning in and thinking to themselves, I'm not over there, but this is certainly a situation that they themselves are going to feel in their everyday lives. Can you kind of walk us through what Americans can expect in coming days and weeks?
Well, they shouldn't expect any deployment of U.S. troops to Ukraine. So that's not a concern. Most Americans are very tired of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, and believe that because Russia went into Ukraine, that will mean the U.S. will deploy forces to Ukraine. That's not going to happen. We will send additional forces to those countries in the area, in the surrounding area, especially the Baltic states, but they'll be very small units, nothing big. What they can expect is to feel it in their energy costs. Russia supplies Europe 40% of its oil and gas. Biden shut down the pipeline here in the United States, the Keystone pipeline, and green-lighted the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in Germany. Now that's been halted, but we're going to experience this at the gas, stations, and your energy costs, but we are not going to experience it in the loss of American boots on the ground. So there will be a short-term cost. But again, this caveated language we're hearing from the White House is if we put sanctions on Russia's energy sectors, then we're going to feel it here at home. And if we are very strong in our reaction, then we're going to experience a cyber attack here at home. And Americans should say, well, let's be preemptive, let's have countermeasures ready, and let's punish Putin, and then open up our own pipelines here in the States. Let's open up the Keystone Pipeline. The United States has the ability to offset Russia's energy output. We should do that. The Biden administration has been against that. We should go back to that. The Biden administration is importing Russian oil and gas, and that should stop immediately. Anything that hurts Putin, again, Russia has the same economy that Texas has. We need to start treating it like that. This is not going to be a nuclear escalation or anything like that. Putin needs to feel the pressure on the energy front.
Well, Michael, thank you so very much for all of the insight. This is a very complicated situation that you've helped us dissect here a bit. It is a situation that is going to be evolving, and like I've been telling all of our guests this morning, I'm sure we'll be touching base in the coming days as we do have new facts and reports to bring to everyone. But thank you very much for the time.
Gabriel, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
With sanctions toward Russia amid this Ukrainian invasion. Joining us now to discuss the very latest, we get to Phil.
This is Andrew Kraft back here.
In Poland, our Aaron Katersky on the ground in Ukraine, along with ABC News national security analyst Steve Ganyard. Aaron, let's start with you. You are there in Ukraine as we are seeing Western countries start to impose these penalties. The White House today saying this is, quote, the beginning of an invasion. So is it? And do Ukrainians see it this way?
Well, NATO certainly
to this, of course, is the very large Ukrainian diaspora that is here in the United States. There are hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian Americans in communities all over the country, and they are on edge as well as they follow all the latest developments out of Ukraine. One is joining me right now from the Bay Area. His name, Igor Markov. Igor, thanks so much for being with us. We know that you are very involved in the Ukrainian American community there in the Bay Area, but also with an organization known as Nova Ukraine, and we can get into the specifics of what that organization does. But how are you feeling at this point in time, hearing what we heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin just yesterday, from the administration today, saying that an invasion has in fact happened and started and occurred? What is your gut feeling at this point in time?
Yes, hi Andrew. Thank you for having me here. Let me get straight to the main question. The events of yesterday and today are appalling. Even though there has been a discussion of possible invasion, the reasoning that Putin, created, the wording that he uses, the law that the Russian Duma approved, that is just madness. It's very hard to believe that this is happening, and people are very dismayed. People are fearing a large number of casualties, but many Ukrainians are willing to fight. Although, of course, from here we can only do what we can.
Igor, you told me you were born and you grew up in Kiev. How did you take that? What did you make of that when Putin said that yesterday, that essentially Ukraine does not have a right to exist, that it essentially was created by the Russian imperialist, state way back when? We're talking, 18th, 17th century stuff here, that your country does not have a right to exist. How did you take that?
That's nonsense. We've heard this from Putin before in 2014. We've heard this from his cronies, and just opening a history book, it makes it very clear that Ukraine, and Kiev specifically, the capital, existed long before Moscow existed. The landmarks, there is a big landmark cathedral in Kiev from the 12th century. This was a country. The statehood of Ukraine was delayed by the Russian Empire. Ukraine was a country after the Russian Empire dissolved, and Ukraine has all the rights to exist. In fact, Putin recognized Ukraine as a country. Ukraine is a founding member of the United Nations. What Putin is saying is just propaganda and nonsense.
Igor, I know you've been in touch with some of your family who are still in Ukraine, who live in Ukraine. They go about their daily lives there. What have they told you, and are they preparing for the worst at this point?
Yes, people are preparing for the worst. There is a number of people who, for the last few weeks, have been going to training for territorial defense. All over Ukraine, a number of people are working on tactical medicine, learning how to give first aid. They're creating beds for wounded who may appear in large numbers soon. People are preparing, definitely. At the same time, there's always hope for some kind of peaceful resolution or peaceful agreements. On the other hand, the terms, the demands that Putin set, they're completely unrealistic. He wants Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. This is a complete non-starter.
Can you go into some of those conversations and some of your family members who are back there? What have they told you specifically? I know you were telling me that they are preparing for possible Plan B, Plan C, Plan D in the event that Russian forces come into Kiev. And of course, that is limiting a lot of travel options available to Ukrainians. We know that many, especially European airline carriers, have suspended flights inbound and outbound.
Yes, apparently Turkish airlines are still flying out of KBP, the Kiev Boryspil airport, but trains are working on schedule, and it's quite difficult to get tickets, I hear, because people are moving west in large numbers. The main option for many people is to move somewhere in western Ukraine, and so they still have hotels available, and of course, people with relatives and friends have options. And then after that, the next option is to move to safer places. West of Ukraine, there are 4 NATO members with shared border with Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland, and those countries are preparing for an influx of refugees, and that is definitely an option too. Western Europe is also preparing for possible refugees from Ukraine, unfortunately.
Igor, what do you want American audiences to know about?
Drinking water before bed burns 46 pounds in 2 weeks. If you are struggling to lose weight and you're over 20...
Hello and welcome to the Kalashnikova Show. After a few months of waiting, we finally have permission to film this. And today we're introducing you to one of the most powerful non-nuclear weapons ever. No other army in the world has anything to match it. This is the TOS-1A Solntsepyok, or Blazing Sun, a multiple rocket launching heavy flamethrower. Its chief characteristic is intense firepower. Let's have a closer look. This system's predecessor, the TOS-1 Buratino, was even in service with the Soviet Army back in the early 1980s. The system proved itself in the Soviet-Afghan War. Solntsepyok, the TOS-1A, is an upgraded version of the Buratino, which had fewer missiles. And the new system is a whole lot more powerful. This family of armored vehicles has another feature. A design based on the T-72 tank chassis. That's why they perform so well off-road. The heavy Solntsepyok weapon is unique because it's a special kind of flame-throwing system. Along with the MRLS BM-30 Smerch, it's the second most powerful weapon after nuclear arms. Solntsepyok is designed to defeat enemy personnel, transport, and armored vehicles. It can destroy enemy targets out in the open and in heavily fortified positions. This armored vehicle carries 24 220mm missiles, and each thermobaric rocket has immense firepower. One distinguishing feature of this system is its high level of fire control accuracy. Firing all missiles at once provides a conflagration that can scorch an area the size of 8 football pitches.
This system is one of Russia's top 5 most powerful weapons that are attracting attention from our foreign partners. And there are indeed significant differences from the earlier generation. For example, the TMZ-T loader and transport vehicle is now armored as well, and the missile's firepower and efficiency have also increased dramatically.
The TOS-1A Sonsebyok carries 24 220mm missiles, and it takes less than half an hour to load them all. A full salvo can be fired in just 6 seconds. It has a strike range from 400 meters to 6 kilometers. The armored vehicle has a crew of just 3. Launch controls are automatic, and this armored vehicle is equipped with a special system that analyzes firing conditions, including air temperature and wind velocity. The crew selects a target, marks the coordinates, and initiates launch from inside the armored vehicle, which gives them additional protection. This weapon's combat capability has been rated very highly by Western experts. The National Interest magazine dubbed it the Devastator, both literally in battle and psychologically. The American media outlet also declared that the system poses a major threat to the U.S. Army and is ideal for eliminating underground enemy targets and fortified positions. Don't miss our latest episodes, and please do remember to subscribe.
If you go to yoga by helicopter, you don't need a lower car insurance rate.
Grammarly helps make your writing clear and concise, no matter where you are.
Welcome to a new episode of the Kalashnikova Show. Today's topic was named after the illustrious military commander Alexander the Great. NATO calls it the Stone. It's the Iskander-M tactical ballistic missile system that can boast several unique features. And today, we're getting a closer look. This tactical system is hailed as a 21st century weapon of unparalleled combat capability. It's been in service with the Russian army since 2006. Since then, NATO specialists have called it one of Russia's most dangerous weapons. Its missiles can penetrate any defense system. Iskander missiles aren't nuclear, but some experts say they have characteristics comparable to nuclear weapons. The early generation of this class was the Tochka-U tactical missile that's still in service with some Arabian armies, including Syria and Yemen. The Iskander-M is designed to destroy other missile systems, artillery pieces, air defenses, and hostile command posts, as well as aircraft on airfields and military bases. The main part of the Iskander system is the self-propelled missile launcher. The vehicle can carry 2 missiles and travels at more than 70 kilometers per hour. The Iskander can be set up to launch in just 16 minutes after reaching a designated location. The interval between launching the first and second missiles is no more than a minute. The missile's launch weight is about 4 tons, and it flies at more than 2,000 meters per second. On top of all that, the missile can change course in flight, which makes it virtually impossible to intercept. Its readiness to launch is not dependent on location or time. Now let's see how the Iskander works at night, an exclusive opportunity thanks to the Russian Ministry of Defense.
Training like this can be carried out both by day and night. It's part of a soldier's daily routine. Now we see the Iskander missile being loaded from a transporter onto a launcher. Night exercises enhance our troops' confidence in our military equipment's reliability and boost their own self-confidence, because it's a very daunting task.
The Iskander system can handle several types of missile, including ballistic and cruise, but they all have a maximum range of 500 kilometers. Ensuring that these missiles don't break the IRNF treaty between Moscow and Washington. Military experts claim that the Iskander is not just a powerful missile, but could also serve as an effective deterrent and be part of an area denial weapons system, which means that deploying it makes an area too dangerous for a potential adversary, thereby preventing them from sending troops in or even crossing it. Western analysts say that just a few Iskander systems could tip the military balance in any region, and Asian media outlets call it a nightmare for any air defense system. Stay tuned and stay with me, Anna Knishenko, for more on state-of-the-art Russian weapons. Don't miss our new episodes, and please remember to subscribe.
Hyundai Elantra versus Toyota Corolla. Hyundai Elantra.